Hi, I'm Brian Fallon, and you're watching 101.9 KINK Radio in the Skype live studio.
Hey, that's Brian Fallon, everybody, right up there. I would tell them not to clap, but, they're just instinctive. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back to Portland. At the Roseland tonight, and the new album is Painkillers. I don't know if you know Brian Fallon's story. He was in a band called the Gaslight Anthem for about 9 years. Yeah, you can applaud that. They did some really
They
good
got
things.
such a hesitance about clapping. It was just jokes. Just jokes.
And then last year the band decided, well, we're gonna do maybe a permanent timeout. We don't know just yet, but
But how him know all this?
well, a little research, and then I was watching this interview that you did, well, many interviews, and I was trying to come up with all the different things to compare and contrast what you've done and what you're doing.
Analyze.
What's the
frequency?
What's the biggest distinction between a Gaslight Anthem record and this new solo Brian Fallon record?
There's three less. Simple math. Simple mathematics.
Can we take a little further?
Yeah.
Brian Fallon, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.
What do you want to know, man?
I don't know. Let's go back a little bit. So you took back to Nashville, where you guys have recorded with your other band, Gaslight Anthem. You go back there again, but you brought in somebody different in the mix, and Butch Walker.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who that is and how that relates to the making of this record?
Yeah, Butch is a great producer. I mean, he's kind of like a rock and roll historian, and he knows a lot about the whole gig. He knows it. You got a question about rock and roll, that's the guy to ask. And we met quickly, just on the recommendation of a couple friends of mine, and sort of hit it off real quick. And then that was it. It was kind of like, you gonna make the record? And he was like, yeah, I think I'd be kind of mad if you went with somebody else. Fair enough. Where's your studio? He said, L.A. and Nashville. I said, cool, Nashville it is.
Nice.
No L.A. Not a fan.
He's a guy, though, that came from a band who then has gone solo. Is that what kind of turned you on a little bit more, or was it just the picking each other's brains and talking shop?
No, I think that it's just more the picking each other's brains. The band solo thing is always a weird thing, because usually what happens is the guy in the band goes, I could do this without anyone else. And then they try, and sometimes, most of the time, fail miserably. And then sometimes it succeeds. In my case, we sort of hit a spot where we said, well, do we make the bad record because nobody's really into it, or do we just not make the bad record? It's like when you're in a fight with somebody and you just know you should stop talking. You're like, if I say that next thing, that's not going to go well, and I'm going to answer for that for years. So we just stopped. We took the high road. But we knew that it just was the time. It was the time when every other band, every documentary I ever watched was like, we should have taken time off. And we just said, you know what? Let us not make the mistake that everyone else did. And so we just said, all right, this is not happening right now. And when it's happening again, we'll start it. If it doesn't happen again, we did a good run that we're all proud of. And there's nothing, not one bit of it that I would regret or do differently or think that, anything. It's not awesome. I think it's awesome. But I did find myself without a job. So so I said, what am I going to do? And I said, well, I sure do like cars. I do. But I'm a mechanic. And listen to somebody else. I got to get up so early. I figured it's just not practical. It's simple mathematics. Getting up at noon is much better than 6. It's
I'd agree with that.
yeah,
Yes.
it's 6 hours difference.
Yeah.
6 minus,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well,
mechanic was no.
Oh, that was a no.
That was a no.
No, because it just wasn't. It wasn't where my heart was. I like doing it, and I like doing it for fun. But I definitely don't want someone yelling at me over a carburetor at my age. When I have these wonderful songs that I want to play for so many people.
Well, you're pretty gifted.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gifted. I don't at what? Not sure. But yeah, I decided. What am I going to do now? And if I start another band, what's that going to sound like? And, I found myself at 35, which is not 22. So I said, okay, what do you have to say now as a 35-year-old? And how do you want to present that? And I just kind of went back to the music that I grew up learning, and the reason I played guitar in the first place, which was, Bob Dylan records and folk music. And so I just said, all right, I'm going to start there. And I didn't want to completely transfer over into making a strictly folk record right out of a band either. So I still wanted to make it like kind of a rock and roll record, and I feel like my 40s might be a good time for a folk record. I don't know if I'm old enough to have a good grasp. Well, because the people that I find that really, even Bob Dylan said that when he was a kid about that song, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. He said, I don't know if I'm old enough to sing that song. And sometimes I feel that way. You have to have an experience and an aged wine to really incorporate something like that and keep it interesting.
No, I get that.
Yeah, unless you're Ryan Adams, which you can do whatever you want. So, and it's interesting. So, for me, I had to, I'm slowly going more in that direction. But yeah, that's kind of how I found myself here.
One of the things that I read that I really liked about what you said, and moving on, is it used to be it was all about Bruce Springsteen. That was the bar, and now your bar is Wilco. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
compare
in a
and
way,
contrast.
I got to define that a little bit. For
yeah,
you.
a little bit.
When I was a kid, the defining moment, it would be like you look at Bruce Springsteen and go like, that guy's from Freehold. That's down the street. Like, look at him. He's giant, and he's got he plays in Giant Stadium. And then you sort of get a little taste of the corner section of Giant Stadium that we got with the Gaslight Anthem, and I said, oh, that's hot in there. That's a cooker. I don't want to be in there. If you say something wrong, you get drunk and maybe fall down and step on a cat or something. You're done in the press. That's it. They'll tweet you for days. And you're right. You write a hit, and then you got to write another hit, and then another one, and another one. And if you write one stinker, you're done. Your career's over. If you gain a few pounds, that's even worse. They tweet at you all day long, and then it like, I can't be living like that. That's not real. That's a joke. I think it's absurd what they do to people like that famous, and the critique that they. So I just said, you know what, man, I don't want anything to do with that. And I said, I looked around for somebody that I could relate to, and I said, that band Wilco, they kind of do whatever they want. They just, and they've done some stuff I think is super weird, but they've done some awesome stuff, and they've never, in my experience with not knowing them at all and just making up stories in my head, they, in my mind, they sort of didn't worry about it. It was much like, like Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros after he was in the Clash, and those guys, where they just did what they thought was the best thing they could do and what was in their heart to do. And really, I feel like that's the reason people started gravitating towards the Gaslight Anthem in the beginning, so why not try that again? Because that's really all I can do at the end of the day, is I can play what I think makes me happy. And so, yeah. And Wilco, I don't think, chases after hit singles, and I'm done with that. I'm out. Leave that game to the professionals. That is absurd of a game. Absurd.
Well, they're consistent and they're steady, and people come out in droves.
Exactly.
They were just here this last weekend, another sold-out
Beautiful
show.
band.
So, yeah.
Right? And probably to how many people? Like 4,000, 5,000
yeah.
people? Like,
Yeah.
well, who doesn't want that gig?
Yeah, right.
Like, you could buy yourself a sweet old car with that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I ain't got that gig.
Yeah.
You shave a couple zeros off that ticket sales numbers, and that's me. But that's all right. I don't mind that. And I work. You got to work your way up to that. And I think that's a real good life. It ain't answering to nobody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good for them.
This is Brian Fallon. His new album is Painkillers. It was out in March. I encourage you to go get it and know more about it, because I'm sure we'll hear more from it right now.
More from it right now.
I'm going to shut up and get out of the way. Brian Fallon, everybody.
Thank you.